I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic realities, and we do this a number of different ways. This show is one of them. We also have a Facebook group of like-minded people committed to spiritual growth and transformation, and you can find us at liveauthentically.today/FB. I also have my first book out. It's SOAR. It's right behind me, actually, SOAR. And it's an experiential journey through a transformative event in my life and shows how I partnered with the universe to create my new reality. And I believe that whoever you are, wherever you are right now, whatever you're going through, even if you feel like you're at rock bottom, I firmly believe that everyone can get to a place of soaring if they're willing to do the soul work. So I have a great show planned today. I have with me Mike Schauch. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Pam, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks so much for being here. How are
Yeah,
you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. Super excited about our show today. So before we get rolling, I like to start our show off with, well, let's actually start off with I'll read a little snippet from your biography. Mike has a really cool background that he's going to share with you today and is doing amazing work in the world. He is a mountaineer, entrepreneur, storyteller who loves to explore remote places around the world and share the depth and beauty of human connection he discovers along the way. And that is just such a beautiful life purpose. And I know you do so much in helping people step into that expansive space. And you do that by example, right? By leading, by really pioneering that. So I'm super excited to hear more about that. But first, we'll start the show off with a question that I ask all of my guests. And that question is, how do you live authentically every day?
Well, that is a great way to start the show and this dialogue. And I think it's what it comes down to very simply is about living your truth, living true to yourself. But I think I'm going to do something a little different, maybe than what you've had on the show before. And I recently wrote this book, A Story of Karma, which was published last year. And what I'd like to do is I'll just read a little bit of, how about a little story time? It's just less than a minute here, but I think it kind of delves into exactly that question. It actually delves into it with another question, but that'll set the stage for our time. Yeah. And just to give a little bit of background, this is about a journey into the Himalaya that I took with my wife Chantal back in 2012, and it just sort of opened my eyes to a whole different trajectory in life. So this is kind of earlier in the book, in the story, when I was I had all these thoughts and questions rolling around in my mind, which we can get into. But yeah, here we go. I remembered the words of Wade Davis, a modern day Indiana Jones. He warned about the risks of cultural homogenization, which could result in the loss of thousands of years of indigenous wisdom. It is strange that we speak with such a sense of sorrow about the disappearance of so many animal and plant species on our planet, while seeming indifferent to the danger that in our lifetime, we are at risk of seeing half of the world's cultures disappear, and with them their languages, thoughts, stories, and legacies. Questions raced through my mind. What did it mean for a part of human consciousness to be gone forever? What did this mean for our future as a human race? If our differences and our cultural diversity are our strengths, what would happen to us if we all become the same? What can we learn from traditional cultures that have survived the test of time? And is there time to learn it before it is all lost? Was this why I had for so long felt drawn to Nepal and its people? This sense that there was something that they had to teach me, maybe even something I could do to help preserve those teachings for others. My thoughts were pierced by a quote I remembered from author Stephen Pressfield. Our job in this lifetime is not to shape ourselves into some ideal we imagine we ought to be, but to find out who we already are and become it. Maybe it wasn't always about driving forward, but rather stopping long enough to reflect, to remember, looking back to rediscover something we'd lost along the way.
I love that. So beautiful and so deep. So many different places we can go with that, and leading up this show with that. Um, I'd love to hear, you talked about discovering who you are, remembering getting to the core of who we are, which is really what authenticity is all about. So
Mm.
what is the experience that obviously all of our experiences make us who we are, but is there one experience in your life that stands above the rest, stands out, that has shaped you?
For sure. Yeah, no, and that it's probably one of the, as you said, there's a whole series of events, but probably one of the most milestone events was actually in the middle of the Himalaya, deep in the mountains. I had this objective to climb this pyramidal mountain that I just identified through a photograph, and that totally blew up in my face. On the very slopes of the mountain. All kinds of things happened. We got caught in a snowstorm at 17,000 feet, and
Oh my God.
one of my gear bags got lost. The mule that was carrying it took off, and just all these things started unraveling. So, like any time, in life when we're dealing with an objective and things start working against us, we have to stop, like you say, stop and question and reflect and be like, okay, should I be forcing this through? Should I be forcing this goal through? Or, are things kind of externally around me guiding me in a different direction? And we can feel it, right? We can feel it in our heart. I call it the heart intelligence. I think our bodies and our minds and our spirits know sort of that right kind of way to go, but oftentimes we're taught to kind of override it with our mind, right? And our mind can be a powerful ally, but I think, if it's in the driver's seat for too long, it can lead us possibly astray. But anyway, there I was in this snowstorm, and decided, whatever's happening out here, I have got to listen to this. And so we ended up going to this other little village, and it was in that village where we encountered a little 7-year-old girl whose name is Karma. And she was teaching this group of kids these English numbers. And I won't get into it because that's the whole story. People can read the story if they'd like. But that moment of meeting Karma in this little village changed the trajectory of my life, of Chantal, my wife's life, of her Karma's life, her family, and all kinds of other people that we've kind of come into contact with as a result. So, but I could not have known that. There's nothing that I could have done that would have planned for that. I mean, that was the most meaningful. It's led to the most fulfilling, meaningful experiences of my life, and there's nothing I could have done to kind of know that that's what was going to be that opening point.
And I love that, because you've really highlighted the importance of just being open, right? And being in that receptive mode and flowing with the direction life takes us. So I'd like to hear you talk about that a little bit, because I think that so many times, we force things, we force outcomes. We have our eyes set on a certain prize, and we're willing to do whatever it takes, whatever, make whatever sacrifices we have to, go through whatever hell we have to along the way in order to achieve that. And then when we get there, we realize maybe that wasn't the right thing after all. So I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about how you can really tap into that feeling. And really, it's all about feeling your way through life, right? It's about, paying attention to, like you said, how your mind is feeling, your body, your soul, et cetera, because that's where the answers lie, deep in our soul. So how can someone begin to shift into being open and being in that receptive mode and allowing and paying attention to those nuances between, flowing and forcing?
Yeah, no, and that's a really good question, because it is a practice. I think it is a practice, and we all have it. We're all connected to that. Doesn't matter who we are or what we've been through. There's a little story that kind of comes to mind, where I heard about once, where these monks were trying to kind of hide this statue of Buddha, because people were coming in to take over their monastery, and they said, "Oh, we don't want this Buddha to be taken or destroyed or anything." So there was this golden Buddha. So what they did was they covered it. they covered it with mud. And there it was, covered with mud for decades, until it just, everyone thought it was just this lump of, earth there. And one day there's this young boy, and he was cleaning around, and he was like he started picking at the mud, and, a piece of the mud came off, and out from underneath shone this golden light. This beam of golden light came out from the statue. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of puts us into a position to answer your question, because oftentimes we have these moments. It doesn't have to be like an epiphany, or, these moments where that heart, that language of the heart comes through us. It could be from a moment of experience, or from a connection with somebody, or whatever it may be. But there's a moment where it comes through. And then the question becomes, what do we do? Do we cover it back with mud because that's the way it's always been? Or do we start like breaking the mud away and like start opening that up? And so I think, like you mentioned the word choice, we have choice at every time. And it's a choice whether do we want to tune in when we have those messages, right, from the heart, or whatever we want to call it. Do we want to tune into it more? Do we want to follow? Do we want to take action, rip off the mud? Or do we want to, to fall into our old sort of patterning, limiting behaviors where we kind of restrict ourselves again? So I think those are the questions to examine and to ask anytime we have an opening like that, to just kind of, pause, reflect, say, okay, well, is this something that I should be paying special attention to? And is this allowing me to expand in a different way? Because I think the same challenges, sufferings, whatever you want to call them, will come up again and again and again for us if we continue to take the same path by covering up the little Buddha, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, to echo that, we're all pulled toward comfort and familiarity, right? What we know, and those limiting beliefs, those limiting behaviors, those doubts, those fears, there's a gravitational pull there. We're pulled in that direction. And so we have to go against that. We have to buck our own current and go against that and choose differently. We have to choose differently, and we have to adopt a different narrative. So what does that narrative sound like? What does that self-talk sound like in your mind now that you've learned how, through many, many different life experiences, to silence the chatter and the noise and the thoughts that don't serve you and move you forward into a place of surrender and trust and belief and faith and abundance and deep knowingness and learning to flow? So how has that narrative that you have in your mind changed?
Well, I think it exactly ties into what you just said. It's about trust, right? It's about, I may not know the answer, like know with the small K, the answer with my mind, but I know the answer with, my in a much deeper way. So I think it has to do with the trust of that. And it's happened, it happened with the little girl, Karma, there, meeting her, opening that up. But it's happened in other instances as well, where in the mountains, particularly, where it's actually saved my life, where, I had this idea that I was going to go up to this one summit, and every spidey sense was going off. I didn't know, what it was. At that time, I was, this was a few years ago, I was younger. And I kind of chose to ignore it because I was looking around objectively. I was trying to see, okay, do I see any dangers? I don't see any dangers. What's going on here? Why am I getting this feeling? I was with two other people. They were kind of like confused about it. I couldn't articulate it. I wasn't ready to trust it 100%. And so we went out, and it had disastrous consequences. So I think, ever since then, I've, especially then, I've learned to kind of trust in those little synchronicities, those little nuances, those feelings, whatever they are, when they come up, to honor them. One of my First Nations friends, he said, he's like, it's great that you're having these emotions or these feelings or experiences, but, what are you going to do to honor it? And I think by honoring it, that's taking action around it. Not like disregarding it, to listen to it and take action around it.
hmm And, I know that, change can be scary, right? I mean, sometimes
Mm.
again, we're pulled towards comfort and familiarity. We're pulled towards what we know, negative as it may be, some people may just decide to stay in a scenario that isn't super productive for them, just because
Mm.
that's what they know. And so stepping into the new can be scary. But I'd love to hear you talk about the importance of really leaning into faith and trust and
Mm.
really distancing yourself or doing away with the idea that you have to have it all figured out. I think something that
Right.
holds people back from making a change is, but I don't know what it's going to look like, and I don't know what it's going to feel like, and I don't have all the answers figured out right now. And I always
Mm.
say, you don't have to have the answers figured out. So I'd love to hear you talk about and do a little like motivational little segment here on stepping into the new and why it's
Mm.
important to trust your gut, let your soul lead the way and just
Mhm.
allow the path to unfold in front of you.
Yeah, well, I think the beautiful thing is that we don't know the way, right? I mean, I think that's what
Yeah.
makes the beauty of life. I mean, even if we could choose to know the way, would we really want to, right? I think that would just take away from the whole magic and mystery of what we're doing here as humans. But there's a concept that I heard about a few years ago, which I think lends itself nicely to this. It's the Tibetan word called bardo, and I don't know if you're familiar with this word, but bardo, what it is, it's a place. It translates to a place of transition. So the Tibetan Buddhists, they believe in reincarnation,
Mhm.
lifetime to lifetime. But what's not often talked about is that they also believe in reincarnating many times in one lifetime.
Okay.
So what they mean by that is we have the ability at any time to choose if we want to essentially incarnate into someone new. And what that means is the bardo is that place of transition where we enter in, where we can choose, what of my past do I want to leave behind, no longer serves me? And
Mhm.
what of my past do I want to carry forward into this new incarnation? So we have that ability to choose. Sometimes it takes an epiphany or something drastic to happen, but it doesn't have to. But we can choose, you know, I to become essentially a new person and not be like it's our decision to keep our past
Mhm.
continuing to define us, if we want to, but we don't have to. And so I think part of the answer to your question is, constantly examining, what in my past is continuing to serve me. And if it's not serving me, well, what can I do to just let it go? It's okay that it's a part of me right now, but if it's not no longer serving me, I don't need to carry this anymore. I don't need to carry this burden on my shoulders anymore, and I can let it go. So I think there's this kind of the letting go process and practice. And I know it sounds easier than it is, but I think it comes down to that first point of realizing that it is a choice and that we choose to carry it or not, going forward.
Right. And, it really is, as I'm sitting here listening to you talk about this, it really does highlight, this process moving from unconscious to conscious, right? It's about
Mm.
moving out of that mode of just doing for the sake of doing or being an autopilot to, does this make sense for me? Is this aligned with who I am? Like you said, how does this serve me? And when we
Right.
really sit and reflect on every aspect of our life and we get super granular and ask ourselves, like, how does this behavior serve me? How does this relationship serve me? How does this friendship serve me? If we take inventory and go through all the different categories of our life, then we're really starting to come into our authenticity, right? When we're starting to
Mhm.
ask ourselves, how is this or is this not aligned with who we are?
Hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. Because I think there's a natural, as we talked about, there's kind of a natural intelligence out there. I call it the sort of the Earth intelligence, which is the most advanced form of intelligence. I think we know the Earth is a living, breathing organism, and it's created us, and so
Mhm.
it knows, right? But we have that innately within us. And so, like you mentioned at the beginning, there are no coincidences, and I truly believe that. If you look into, if you spend enough time in nature, and you will see that nothing happens without a reason. Everything happens for a reason. Everything has its place, its purpose. Everything happens for a reason, and I think that we are directly tied into that. So if we can tap into that deeper level of intelligence, of innate intelligence, that's when we can start to, like you said, kind of, come into our consciousness, come into our true consciousness. And that has all kinds of, implications. I mean, again, vibrating on that versus, like you mentioned, some of the more kind of surface level or sort of the more of those like whether it's anxiety or fears or angers or all that, what I call surface emotions. Once we start delving deeper into it, vibrating on those deeper levels, vibrations, what we know about them is that they match each other. Mm-hmm. So, the more of us who are vibrating on those deeper levels, the more we're actually influencing the entire vibrational energy of the entire world. So it's actually serving, the greater good in a better way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that that's something that we can all play a role in, right? As we work to heal ourselves on an individual basis, that really does have reverberations that, that go out into, mass consciousness. It affects everybody. And it doesn't take, it doesn't mean that every person needs to, be an author or be a healer or be an awakener or be a spiritual coach or whatever. Anything counts, right? Any small act of kindness, kind words, anything you do to connect with other people, all play a role in elevating the collective consciousness.
For sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, it reminds me of a conversation I had once with this young monk, and we were talking about all kinds of things. But one of the questions that came up was, I asked him, I said, how do you define enlightenment? Mm-hmm. And he kind of thought about it for a moment, and he said, well, it's freedom of view. I said, what do you mean by that, freedom of view? And so we were walking in this busy street, and he said, well, look at that chair over there. We'd all agree that it's a wooden chair, but if we're all looking at it from different perspectives, we're all going to have a different view of it. And it's the same if we look at a bed, whether it's a big bed or a small bed, or a meal, whether it's a fancy meal or a simple meal, or a human being, if it's a rich person or a beggar. We all have these different perspectives. But if we can first agree that it's simply a wooden chair or a bed or a meal or a human being, that kind of allows us to be free of this view first. And through that, we can open up again that greater level of that greater depth of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And expand into it. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well as I go through. It's often, it's easy to get caught up in this idea, well, that is better than this, or that's different than that, or but it's like, no, hang on, what is it at the core first? And I asked him on the back of that, I asked him, well, how would you recommend to achieve that freedom of view? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, we do it through compassion and through loving kindness, because the more we practice compassion and loving kindness, the more it actually gets us out of our own mind. It puts us into the mind of another different perspective, and it frees us of that view again.
Yeah, that plays a huge role in making the shift to authenticity and to the truth. And that's a result of doing the work, like you said, shedding all of the things that don't serve us, right? The fears, the doubt, etc. And ultimately, that's how we craft our belief system, right? Through our life experiences, and we get to the core of who we are. So I'm curious, through your experience of being in the Himalayas, I'm curious, how did your belief system change as a result of that experience?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one, because it kind of, I wouldn't say it necessarily changed, but it kind of opened. It kind of, it allowed for expansion, because I think, again, I grew up in the West here. Like many of us, we're taught about, we're very goal oriented. We got to do in order to get that, we have to do all these little steps here. So I think, from a very young age, we're kind of built to believe that, we got to have these series of goals, and this is how we get through life, and this is what success means, and blah, blah, blah. But it's just, think it's actually there. What opened for me in the Himalaya was just that, no, there's actually a different way. And it has to do with, thinking about it instead of, I mean, goals have a purpose and a place, but they shouldn't be the driving force of everything we do. But what's more important is setting intentions. Like, what is my intention for, for example, this conversation? Because then we'll start focusing on the depth of it versus the so-called success of it, right? The success is just a moment in time. It's just like okay, I did whatever. Here's the trophy. But depth is about, that's what creates the meaningful connections and the meaningful experiences. And so intentions, I think, allow us to focus on the depth of it, but they also allow us to, intentions are more adaptable, right? Because when we set a goal, we set that goal from who we are at the time that we set it, but we could change in the process. And maybe that goal, as we're, partway down the path, maybe that goal we discover, hey, actually, that doesn't make sense anymore. But the intention can stay the same. So, and that allows us to kind of navigate it more effectively. So I think that was a huge one, is just kind of opening, this idea that, life isn't about goal setting. Life isn't about living with like these strict goals. It's more so about living with intentions. And through intentions, we can find more meaning, we can find more fulfillment. And I think that leads us to, happiness. This word happiness, it gets thrown around, but it's funny. It's one of those things where if we choose to chase happiness, I don't think we'll ever hit it. I think happiness is almost like a byproduct of creating a meaningful life. So if we instead set an intention to create a meaningful and fulfilling life, I think happiness will be one of those things that just sort of comes as a result.
I agree with you. Yeah. And that's been a big piece of my journey too, is really thinking a lot about happiness and what does that mean and how do we achieve it? And I think we're conditioned to, to think that, happiness is somewhere else, right? Happiness will be when I move into the big house or get the corner house, or get the shiny car, whatever it is. Like happiness is always somewhere other than where we are. But I believe that happiness is a string of happy moments. So I always try to really optimize the moment in front of me and really live in the moment and soak it up, because it's the only moment in time that everything is going to be just as it is right now. Right. And so we have a choice again, what do we want to feel in that moment? So it really is about harnessing our power in the now, connecting to a source of energy greater than who we are in the now. And then if we do that on a moment to moment basis, and it's a moment to moment practice and something that you have to put intention behind it and work at, you have to choose happiness in every moment. If we do that moment after moment after moment and just string those moments together, I believe that's the recipe for a happy life. That's when you look back and say, yeah, I really did live from the heart. I let my soul lead the way, as opposed to chasing that image of what you think happiness should look like.
For sure. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think, again, if I look back to that experience in the Himalaya, I thought I wanted to climb this mountain, right? I thought that would, bring me whatever I was looking for. And instead, it was found through this connection with another human being, this very deep connection that was uncovered, almost like I would call a karmic connection, possibly transcending past lives. So it's like, and through that, again, it creates meaningful. So yeah, like you're saying, I mean, it's almost like, how can I create a meaningful life?
Right.
What can I do to create a meaningful life for myself and for others? And then everything else, I think, will flow from that.
Absolutely. So beautiful. Well, I just noticed the time, we're getting ready to wrap up here, but I wanted to just kind of turn the stage over to you for the last couple of minutes and have you talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. So if you'd like to mention your book and where people can find it. And by the way, thank you for sending me a copy. I'm so looking forward to reading it. So,
Thanks,
so if you could just mention your book and where people can get in contact with you, and then any other parting words of wisdom that you would like to end our show with.
For sure. Yeah, no, if people would like to learn more about the book or me, they can just visit my website. It's just my name, michaelschauch.com. So that's michaelschauch.com. The book, as I mentioned, is called A Story of Karma finding love and truth in the Lost Valley of the Himalaya. And so if you read it, I hope you enjoy it, and hopefully it brings something to you to kind of uncovering your own little Buddha, as I mentioned, inside the Buddha within. I guess partying, I would just, I would say, one of the biggest lessons I learned from the girls and from, Karma and her sister Pemba in the Himalaya there is just to, the importance of supporting ourselves and each other in our own journey. Not to try and force expectations or, try and, create these ideas of how things should be for me or for them or for anyone, but just to support, whether it's our children or our friends, our partner, whoever it may be, support each other in our own journey. We're all in our own journey. And I think we're all doing the best where we are in that journey. And so the best thing we can all do is support each other in that.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on my show today. It's been such an amazing discussion. Thank you.
Yes. I'm amazed that the time flew by like that.
I know. I glanced up over it. I know.
Seems like we just started.
It does. Yeah. So thank you again for taking time to be on my show. And to all of our viewers and listeners, thank you. I so appreciate you being here. I believe that time is a choice, and I'm grateful that you were here today to listen to everything that Mike has had to share. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Bye.